Okay. So let's take a moment so that everyone can join. Thank you for having you all today or this morning or this evening, depending on where you're on the planet. So we'll try to address, we got many questions before the webinar, so this live Q&A session. So feel free to ask your questions in the chat box or in the live Q&A box, and I'll try to address them as quickly as I can. Any questions that we may not have time to address, don't worry, we'll also send an email after this session so that you can ask any questions that I couldn't have addressed, or book a consultation with me as well so that we can review any specifics that would apply in your situation. But so, I think it's time. So, and also, well, before we get started, although you don't see her, but thanks to Marianne as well, that's joining us on the call. She'll be answering some of your questions that can be answered or addressed quickly. So cheers and thanks to Marianne as well. So yeah, I think, yeah, so let's deep dive. I'm reading through some of your questions already. Yes, we'll be answering some tax-related questions. And thank you from Rio de Janeiro. We are from, let's say, Biarritz today, so our side of the globe. First question I had initially was from David, who asked us about how to apply for French residence. Do we need to have bought our own property? Well, this is a question actually that I see often, and I could work both ways. So two things: you don't need to have a visa or a French residency permit to buy a property or to invest in France in general, and it also works the other way around. You don't need to have bought the property to apply for a visa or for residency in France. However, well, you don't need that property directly, but you do need to have a permanent address in France to be able to apply for a permanent, well, a long stay visa. So you can do with the rental accommodation. You can also use something called the attestation d'hébergement, which basically, if you have friends or family living in France, they can have you for free. Or you can use a property that you've bought already. So in a way, having bought the property is not a requirement. It's not a direct one. You can do without, but obviously it is one that you can use if you have it. Okay, so cheers to our friends that joined from the States as well. Nice to have you this evening. Sorry, by the way, sorry for American friends. When we booked this session, I didn't realize that you had daylight saving times updates in between the communication we ran for this session and today. So hence the mix up. Sorry about that, guys. I'll be a bit more careful next time. We don't have we'll have that update in the weeks to come in France, so that's why I didn't thought about that. Okay, so let's see with some other questions. Okay, question from Darren. We're looking to apply for a 12-month visa at the end of the year. The sufficient funds, as written on the application form, are unclear. Do you know the amount of funds needed? This is also another question that we're being asked often. Actually, this one is very simple. Brace yourself. There is a bit of math that's involved, but it's not rocket science. So what you need to have, you need to meet France minimum wage. Okay, so income, you can use income or savings. Okay, we'll do step by step. You need to meet France minimum wage, which at the minute is 1,398 euros. So let's say 1,400. Okay, we're not math geniuses. At least I am not. So just to do the math a bit more simply, 1,400 a month is what they expect you to be making as ongoing income, or to have as a revenue stream or whatever. So which is France minimum wage. That could be updated. So France minimum wage is what you should get. If you don't have income or any kind of income, you just are not working or not yet retired, then you can substitute that with savings. And how much do you need? It's very simple. 12 times the minimum wage. So the equivalent of a 1 year's minimum wage in savings. Could be in a foreign bank account. So it could be in USD, could be in GBP, Canadian dollars, whatever. Obviously, if it's not in euros, then you need to consider and have, the currency rate in mind, exchange rate in mind, because it can vary, but you basically need to have that. Also bear in mind that if it's more than one of you applying, for example, if it's a couple, it's best to meet the requirement times 2, for each, but they would apply kind of a discount as a couple. So actually it's much lower than that. Like, for example, usually they'll be satisfied if you have 2,000 euros monthly income as a couple, which is 24,000 a year in savings instead of the monthly income. So that's also something you can do. So short answer is, again, these are just rough figures, guys. Don't take that to the letter, but the more you can do, the better. But if you have so 1,400 times 12 in savings, or 1,400 a month ongoing revenue, you meet the requirements. And well, ideally times 2 for a couple. But again, if you only have 2,000 a month or 24,000 in savings as a couple, they'll be happy with that and we'll get you through the gates. Okay, that's for this question. Okay, so okay, is it possible? So question from Joe: is it possible to get a rental agreement from an estate agent without a long stay visa? Well, yes, this is often a game of it's kind of a catch-22 situation very often, because you do need a long-term contract to have, in theory, to have that visa. But sometimes it's like, well, I'm not around, so how do I secure the long-term contract? So hence the catch-22 situation. So nothing prevents you from securing a long-term rental agreement through an estate agent or any kind of network. You can also do that directly with the property owner, if you know someone in France, or if you've been referred or recommended to. And you can use that address for a long-term visa. It's actually something we would strongly advise. If you're coming, depending on where you're coming from, if you're coming from Canada or from the US, well, you're supposed to have that, but sometimes, they might be happy with an Airbnb accommodation or something like that. In theory, you're supposed to have a long-term agreement. France only have 12-month contracts, but don't worry, you as a tenant will not be committed for 12 months. It's actually you sign for 12 months. The landlord, the property owner, cannot kick you out, but you as a tenant, you can walk away within a single month notice. So that's why we call that a long-term contract. But the long-term bit actually of the contract is mostly the landlord towards the tenant and not the other way around. The tenant can walk out of the apartment, of the property, within a single month notice. And that kind of contract is 100% visa compliant. So that's the one you should be aiming for if you don't have a property of your own or can't get that attestation d'hébergement I've mentioned. Okay, so the client. Okay, question from Julie. The client has a short-term 3-month visa starting soon. He is considering applying for a 1-year visa. Can he apply already? Does he need to be in France first? Okay, so well, first, to have a short-term 3-month visa, probably he's coming from a particular country. I mean, UK, US, Canada, South Africa, Australia, that they don't have 3 months. I mean, you can just go for, you have the 90 days, every 190 days allowance. So it's probably a country a bit particular you're speaking or referring to. This one would require more in-depth knowledge of the case to answer it properly. However, I can answer about the applying for the 1-year visa bit. Whatever you're applying for, a visa is something you apply for from abroad. Well, considering my perspective, so France. So the visa has to be done from either the country of residency or the country of nationality. Okay, so it cannot be done in France. Everything in France is dealt with by the a local governmental office that's called the préfecture, and they don't deal with visas. They can extend a visa, but they don't deal with visas. They deal with something I'd like to call a residency permit that we call the carte de séjour. Okay, so doesn't really answer your question, but half of it. Okay, Alistair is asking, want to move to France, I'm self-employed. Can I get a work visa and set up my company there? What are the steps? Yes and no, but I'd rather lean towards no. So if you're self-employed, it's not a work visa, it's rather a business visa or an entrepreneur visa or a profession libérale visa. It depends on what you're doing. They're kind of all the same in a way. It really depends on what you're doing and how quickly you want to set up that business and what you'll be doing as well. For example, if you're running a gîte, usually, I mean, unless the turnover exceeds 23,000 euros a year for the household income, you don't have to set up a business. You can run that under your national taxes. So, you know, depending on what you're doing exactly, there might be some subtleties. But basically, if you're looking at registering a business in France, then you're looking at a business visa indeed, and that business visa comes. So actually, the proof of income I was mentioning to you a bit earlier would be substituted with a business plan. Okay, although you can also use savings that you may have to kind of strengthen your file, saying, okay, well, maybe well, the business plan and the business visa in general. Obviously, they're a bit more subjective because you think you'd be doing something. So don't get too cocky there. Try to actually aim as low as you can. Obviously, because if you meet the requirement, well, the business plan expectations or above, they'll be super happy with that. And especially if you can support your application with savings. So even if you aim super low, like saying I'd be making 10,000 euros, which is a bit short, it's not enough, but you also have 10,000 euros in savings, then, you know, both combined will support your application. And then, because when you apply for residency, they'll double check for the requirements again. So if, in a way, you're too far off, they'll become suspicious and they won't like it. So the goal for you is to, you know, it's like a mortgage application in a way, you know, you're trying to build that residency score. So the more your file looks credible or the more your file looks good for the visa application, but then again, you have to consider that residency application in 1 year's time. And you want to make sure it remains kind of consistent, because then, you know, the prefecture, the guys that are dealing with these residency permits, what they want to see is that your situation in life is stable. You know, you have to think that France wants you around, you know, that they're not there to kick you out of the country. The only thing they want to see is that, in a way, you're going the extra miles to become France or be part of France and have a stable-ish situation. And the more stable your application will look, the more they see stability and continuity all through the renewals you're making, the higher the odds for them to grant you that carte de séjour or to renew it, or to eventually provide you with the multi-use permit, which is the 4 or 5 years residency permit. And then eventually, once they renew it another time, it's the 10 years permanent permit. So yeah, here you go. Hopefully that answers at least part of the question. Okay. Okay, if my spouse has both EU and US citizenship and for tax purposes is considered a US resident, and I have only US citizenship, what is the appropriate path for me to seek a long-term stay in France? So, okay, so with someone with the EU, so this case is actually very interesting. So it doesn't matter that you're American or British or, you know, South African for that matter. It's basically, we have a case where one partner is European, has a EU passport, whatever is French or not, actually, in that regard, doesn't change anything. EU passport, and another without an EU passport, non-EU passport. So for tax purposes, doesn't change anything. you suppose you're tax liable in the country you're a resident in. So whatever, the only implication in your particular case, when you have a US passport, US always want you to file your taxes in the US. Whatever you're tax liable there or not, as long as you have a US passport, that you need to keep the US aware of your financial situation. So that's a US specific requirement, but all the other non-EU residents, they don't have that. France has non-dual taxation agreement, so basically not paying the taxes twice with most countries in France. So UK, US, Canada, they have non-dual taxation agreements, which means you're supposed to file your taxes in the country of residence. If you have income streams in other countries, you're supposed to file some taxes there as well. But at the end of the day, whatever is taxed on the one hand will not be taxed on the other hand. Or sometimes, there is a deduction straight away. You can apply for a tax credit. So basically, no tax implication. There is an implication for visas and residency. So first implication, when you have a EU passport, well, you can come to France without a visa. You can just walk into France, stay in there, no problem. Two implications though, you will need to apply for a carte de séjour as well, a carte de séjour as an EU citizen, just stating that you're a resident, but this one doesn't come with tests like the non-EU resident carte de séjour would. That's it. You'd have like a tiny requirement, which is you need to be medically insured. So if you just have the EU passport, but do not have an EU social security number, let's say you have an Irish passport, but you don't have an Irish social security number, then you need to buy private medical insurance until you're part of the French social security system. That's it. But the difference in your case, you don't have any particular set of requirements you should meet. You can go for an hospitalization only policy for that matter. You just need to have basic level of cover until you're covered by the French system. So starting from the day you arrive, but that's it. That's the only requirement. If you do have a European social security number, let's say from Ireland, still my example, then you just need to apply for what you would call the EIC, which is European Health Insurance Card. That's for free from social security, the social security scheme you depend on. So in my case, my example was Ireland. Okay, so that's the only difference. But for the spouse of an EU citizen, then there is a difference. It depends if the spouse, well, that EU citizen spouse, is French or not. If you're the spouse of a non-French, so EU citizen, it's fairly straightforward. If you travel across with the EU spouse, you don't need a visa. Okay, and you can apply straight away for the carte de séjour as well. The main difference between the EU spouse and a non-EU spouse is that the non-EU spouse should apply and secure the carte de séjour within 90 days. So you should rush into that, get that carte de séjour as the spouse of an EU citizen. That's the name of the carte de séjour. For the EU spouse, on the other hand, in theory, you have up to 6 months to get it done. But I would obviously strongly suggest that you get it done together, well, the sooner the better, and then it's done. But that's the main difference. So the spouse of an EU citizen, on the other hand, so the one that's non-European traveling with the European spouse, needs to be insured and needs to meet visa and residency insurance requirement. Okay, so basically this is a bit more of a stricter kind of framework, but it's not the end of the world either. And same as the EU spouse, as soon as you're part of the French system, if your policy can be cancelled, you can switch to what the French would call a mutuelle or top-up health insurance. Okay, so I think I've answered this one. Okay, can we look at later? I think this question refers to, is there a replay? Yes, there is one. Hopefully that was the question. Can you explain the new language requirements, and do you need to have them before you get your carte de séjour? Okay, so this is all brand new. So basically what the deal here is, the first thing is, don't worry. First, there is a more strict rule for people who are applying for the language, so for citizenship, which honestly I don't see the point, but you don't have to. apply for citizenship, you can just go with the carte de séjour and residency permits. I mean, I have clients. I have an example in my head from the US who have been with a carte de séjour for 30 years. It's not a problem, especially once you've reached the stage of the 10 years, which is a permanent permit. They don't check for anything at that stage. It's just like a passport. You just renew it. But you're correct. There is a language test that's being set up for the multi-years residency permit. So that's the first good news. You don't have any language test for visas, no language test for the 1-year residency permit, and it becomes discretionary and a very particular process. So it depends on your situation. But the usual process is you go with the visa for 1 year, then you convert that visa into a residency permit, so that carte de séjour, they give you a 1-year carte de séjour, and then you'll have to renew it for 2 or 3 times. So it means before they'll consider giving you a multi-use permit, okay? So that means, and the language test is only for the multi-use permit. So that means you've been in France for 4 to 5 years before you'll have to consider that language test. And for that residency permit, multi-use permit, I think it was A2 or B1, I don't remember exactly, but that's basically the level that's required, which is not as strict as the one. I mean, they've increased the level by 1 bar basically for citizenship. So, and also something worth mentioning, if by that time you're 65 or more, there is no language test requirement as well. Okay, so if you're coming to retire, maybe after 4 or 5 years, you know, the time it takes for you to get to that stage where they can consider the multi-use permit, well, maybe you're 65 or more, and then they'll drop their language requirement test. Unless they've changed the rules by then, but for now, this is the state, this is the current situation. Also worth mentioning, should you fail the test, it's not the end of the world. You can always reapply for a 1-year permit until you can get the test, okay? And for residency permit, there is no civic test, okay? It's only for citizenship. That's why, well, unless you're super good with France and you're really knowledgeable about France and have a good level of French, but you can stick with residency permit. It's not really an advice. It's just, you know, well, why go through the hard way when you can have it more easy? So the residency permit way is more easy. So hopefully it answered this question about that new language test regulation. Okay, I read that all documents, questions from Matthew. I read that all documents submitted to the French consul for application needs to be translated into French. Who does such things? Okay. Well, it depends on the document. The official documentations, like, you know, birth certificate, marriage certificate, yes, they need to go through an official translator. Well, you would find official translators, like sworn translators, basically, or as we would say in France, traducteur assermenté. Basically, you can actually type traducteur assermenté in Google, and there are lists, official listings, with all the people that are part of the local barreau, which is the lawyer office in the area you're considering moving. Whatever the one you're using, it's not a problem. You can use anyone because you're not yet in France usually when you do that. Or if you don't know where to be looking at, well, just get in touch with us and we'll provide you with some names. That's it. Okay, for this one. Okay, Marie France. Okay, this name sounds French. Hello. Bonjour, Fabien. Yeah, hello, Marie France. If I do buy a property in France and then rent it on Airbnb sometimes when I'm not in France, do you know how taxes work in this case? Okay, do I need to file a French tax return if I'm living in France part-time? At what point do I have to? Okay, so no, same question as always. You do need to file a tax return in the country you're tax liable in. And so in that case, well, if you are a US tax resident, you need to file that under US taxes. Sometimes you might be liable for some taxes depending on which city you're in. For example, property tax needs to be paid in France. So you will have to file some taxes in France. If you have a property in France, this is mandatory. But you may not be taxed on that revenue stream if you're not a French permanent resident. For all those questions, by the way, if you want if you want advice, or if you want to speak with a tax lawyer or something, we have very good contacts. So I'm more than happy to share some details after the show. Okay, I'm from Australia and I have a carte de légitimation from my job in Switzerland while living in France on long stay visa. I'm thinking of a way to live in France without my Swiss job. What kind of visa can I apply for? Okay, well, this is a very specific question. It really depends on your situation, because if you're working, then it's a work visa. If you want to set up a business, then it could be a business visa. If you want to retire and no longer be working, that would be a visitor visa. It really depends on your situation. This one, I'm sorry, I cannot answer without knowing more about your situation, but it's not a tricky situation. It's just I need to have more details. We moved to France from the UK in 2020 when we retired before Brexit. Good move. And I have a carte de séjour, which is probably a post-Brexit agreements one. Brilliant. Are we able to travel as much as we want? Yes, well, sure. France is actually one of the top countries these days in the European Union for visas, actually, and residency permits. Well, you can come in and out as often as you'd like. Again, well, only thing to consider is which country are you tax resident in. But apart from that, France really doesn't care. As long as you're paying the taxes you due, you're fine with that. Obviously, as long as your carte de séjour is valid. If it's one from Brexit, it's probably a 5 years or a 10 years carte de séjour. So as long as it doesn't expire, you're free to come and go as long and as often as you'd like in France. And before it expires, just, well, if you want to stick around, just don't forget to renew it. But that's it. Healthcare question. Okay, I live in the UK. I've had a pneumonia EU passport. Oh, okay, not sure what that means. So the 90 days rule isn't a problem for me. However, the problem I have relates to, I'm 61 and retired from a job as a doctor. However, I'm not old enough for the UK state. Yeah, okay, but my only income is with an HS pension. I would intend, okay. Okay, there's kind of a lot of things here. So first thing is, yes, coming from the UK, if you're not state pension age, so not 66, well, usually, unless you're working in the force, but if you're not 66 or more, you're not eligible to a particular program that is called the S1 program. So if you are a state pension age from the UK, there is a post-Brexit agreement, which basically is called the S1 program. You can apply for this and get free healthcare in France. Don't need private medical insurance to support your visa application. And substitute, I mean, the S1 will substitute to that private medical insurance requirement. If you're not in that very comfortable situation, it's not a big deal. It's just that you'll have to apply for a visa and we'll need to support your application with private medical insurance. So we can help you with that, as there are some medical issues potentially, and it's a bit obviously personal. I strongly suggest you get in touch with us. We have solutions, whatever the situation. So it's not directly an issue, but obviously it's a multi-step answer. With the language requirement, is there a time frame for obtaining the A2 certification prior to applying for the multi-year visa? Can you get the certification several years ahead of applying? So yeah, okay. So well, the certification is, as you can have it. Once you have it, it proves your level. So yes, you can have it several years in advance. If you're already good enough in French, that works. Unless they change the level required by the time you need to apply. It's something I like to correct. I mean, it's not a multi-year visa. The visa is something you apply for from abroad. I'm saying this because there is a lot of confusion around these wordings, and I'm just saying this is my definition, okay? Not saying this is the word of God, but just to avoid being lost in translation sometimes, the visa is a page in your passport, okay? So that's your passport in a way. Once you're in France, you then apply for a carte de séjour, which is a residency permit. It's exactly like your driving license, okay? And that's the one, that's a one-year one that's converted into a multi-years one. So I would rather call it a multi-years residency permit rather than a multi-years visa, just to avoid confusion. There is one thing that's technically like a multi-year visa, which is called the passeport talent, but it's something else. So that's why, to avoid confusion, I prefer to make sure that we are on the same page in terms of wording. But yes, you can apply several years ahead as long as you have the certificate that you got the test and you passed the test and you have that A2 level, that you're good. If that's the answer you were looking for. Can I make an investment in home for visa, like the golden visa program? So this is a question, actually, a question I've been asked quite often. So France does not have a golden visa program. We do have one type of, so I have to speak about that Passeport Talent thing. So the Passeport Talent is kind of a multi-use visa. That's why most of you guys are actually looking at this and like, oh, I want to apply for this one. So there are multiple types of Passeport Talent. You could be like a C-level or senior employee. So with a master degree, earning at least 42K per year in France at C-level, so the niveau cadre, as we would say in French. So if you meet these requirements, and then you can apply for that Passeport Talent instead of a work visa. Also, if you're working in an industry that France wants, I don't know, you're like a nuclear engineer or something like that, also you may apply. You have a talent, literally, that France wants, you'll apply. Obviously, if you're Brad Pitt, well, hi, Brad. So then you can apply for a Passeport Talent as well, because you're an international star and they know it. It gets very tricky when you, I don't know, you're applying in a small band and you're like, well, can I apply for the Passeport Talent? Well, then it gets super highly subjective. So I would not risk it. Maybe, but it gets subjective. And then there is another category of Passport Talent, which in a way is an investment visa. So if you invest 300,000 euros into a French business or you acquire shares of a French business, or you set up a French business investing 300,000 euros of your own money into that business, then you can apply for that business visa. So that Passeport Talent, which will give you, so you have to commit for 5 years. Okay, the money needs to be there. You cannot draw down on the money. You need to invest and keep the money in there for multiple years. And then that will give you, well, honestly, I forgot. It's like 4 or 5 years. I think it's 5 years straight away. Or 4 years, yeah, 4 years, sorry, a 4 years visa straight away. It's very good, which will automatically be renewed into or converted into a 3 years residency permit. So that's a very good one. It's a very good one. But you need to have 300,000 euros, well, willing to invest into something and just leave the money there. So it's kind of a hefty price tag. So usually we would rather go, if you have that access to that kind of money, you could also apply for a visitor visa. And the requirement is to have like 20,000, 30,000 euros in savings, and then you can use all the rest of the money to just, invest it in whatever project you want. You're not restricted to France. I don't have to commit for years. That's another way to do it. But yes, there is that possibility. So there is kind of an equivalent to the Golden Visa program. Obviously, this is France. So we've made it much more complex and tricky, and don't use the same names of the other. Otherwise, that wouldn't be funny in France. We don't like it if it's too simple. Okay, how long estimated average does it take to purchase a home, and any pitfalls to be aware of? Actually, France, it's a very good question, because France is very good in that regard. So it's not fast, it's not slow either. I mean, the average process, but the buy time, once you've put down an offer, it's been accepted, it's a 90 days process. Okay, and it's kind of a straight, I mean, it could be a bit faster, a bit slower, but it's kind of a 90 days process. Basically, plus or minus a couple of weeks, but it's kind of 90 days. Any pitfalls? Not that I can think of from the top of my head, because it's very secure. You're putting down an offer, and then it's game over for everyone. There is no more room for negotiation. There is kind of a cool-off period. Everyone can withdraw from the deeds during that cool-off period, and without, I mean, at no penalty. And then there is another period where you can still back off, but then you'd have to pay a fee. And then it's settled. Then there is the mairie that can also, well, basically the state in a way, can declare that whatever deal you've made is actually too good, and they can substitute themselves to you if they think you had a too good of a deal. We call that préempté in French. and buy the property on your behalf. Well, not on your behalf, instead of you. But honestly, unless you're in a very highly culturally rich area, like central Bordeaux or Paris or something, it almost never happens. It almost never happens. So in rural France, basically, it never happens. And even if you're in an historical area, like Mont Saint-Michel or places like that, you really need to have, it only happens if the mairie has plans to, I don't know, like you're next to a school and they want to extend it, so they're looking for that property actually to buy, but it's very rare. So, but there is a 1 month period extra on top of all these periods so that the mairie can potentially trigger that thing. And then it's finished, and then you're going through all of that through like kind of a solicitor that we have in France that's indirectly is a public worker, but it's not. It is an independent, but is a kind of a public worker. Is collecting the fees for the government, which we call the notaire. And that guy also will proxy the money. It will escrow the funds. So you would not pay the seller, you would pay the notaire, and the notaire will pay the seller once everything's sorted out and is certain that the ownership will be transferred to you alongside with the keys. So once everything's settled, the funds are being transferred to the seller and you are being handled the keys by the notaire, not by the seller. So that's why it's super secure, because there is a third party, which is a trusted third party regulated by the state. So it's super secure. So yeah, well, no particular pitfall apart from make sure that once you've put down an offer, you're willing to commit to it, because there is, I mean, the conversation is over. Well, negotiation is over. Once you put down an offer, apart from withdrawing from it, there is no way you can back off, or you'd have to cancel the offer. Okay. If I buy a chateau, Gite, can I live in it for 8 months and rent it out for? Yeah, sure. Well, again, you'll have to apply for a visa to be able to be in France for more than 90 days every 180 days. But then again, France is super flexible with that. You can live in France and be in there, or in France, or actually in Europe, because that visa also allows you to be, well, up to 6 months in any other European country. Okay, so you can live in your chateau for 8 months or more. Actually, very good. Well, tell me what the address, and I'll come visit, pay you a visit. When you're not there, this is even better. But no, I don't know. Okay, no, you can definitely do that, Caroline. No problem. And no tax implications. I mean, if you have income or rental income, you just have to declare it on your tax income, and that's it. Okay. Okay, no, yeah, Gary, you're quoting the France minimum wage. That's the gross income. I'm mentioning to the net income, because what I want to see is the net income. Okay, so the amount you're putting is not the amount you should meet. Well, you need to meet the net income. Okay, Jonathan, are there different types of VLS? Can you choose which one you apply for? Are there different benefits you can access when in France? So, well, yes and no. So VLS, for those who don't know, so it's a visa long stay, so different visa long stay, which basically are the 6 or 12-month visas. For the sake of this, I'll assume we're talking about the 12-month visa. Yes, there are different types of 12-month visa. So yes, you can choose the one you apply for, but, well, you can choose, but maybe not all of them are applicable in your situation. For example, there is the work visa. There is the non-working visa, which is called the visitor visa. Same, it has to be confusing. Otherwise, that's not France. Visitor seems it's a temporary visa. It's a permanent visa. So the visitor visa can also be the retirement visa, for example, but this one no longer exists. So that's the visitor visa. You can have the business visa, entrepreneur visa, the different types of visas. So you can choose from any of those, but it's highly likely that you may not have a choice. I mean, depending on the specifics of your situation, there is a particular one you should be applying for. So technically you can choose from either, but probably given the specific of your situations, there is only one that applies to your particular case. Sometimes there are more, so then well, it's a matter of deciding which one is best. But deciding which one is best is not because you'll have more perks, so it would be easier. Usually it's more like if there is one that's easier to get, we'd rather try this one rather than the other. A typical example is you're looking to set up a business in France, but it's not yet certain, you don't have all the details yet. Might be best starting with a visitor visa, and let's say in 6 months time, once you've done all your research, you have the business plan, you're ready to incorporate the business, then at this stage you can incorporate the business, and then we'll just have to declare to the authorities that you're no longer starting as a visitor but now as a business, and then you'll have like a business residency permit afterwards. It's completely doable. Okay, so that's when you, in a way, you would have a choice. Like instead of going straight away for the business visa, if you're not sure, then you can go through another visa first, because it's easier to get a visitor visa than a business visa. That's it. So in these conditions, yes, but it doesn't change any benefits. I mean, everyone will have the same process: visa, social security application, which you can do after 90 days. This one, we didn't speak about this one. You definitely should consider that. There's too many people, way too many people that I see that have to renew their private medical insurance because they forgot to apply, or they applied too late. After 90 days, guys, whatever the situation, you're eligible, sometimes even earlier. If you have a business visa and set up a business, even earlier, but after 90 days, you can apply for social security in France. So you should do it, because it's a lengthy process. It's a 6 to 7 month process. But if you do everything as shortly or as soon as you could, odds are high that you will have a French social security number to support your residency application, and they'll love it. They'll love it in terms of residency. Okay. Okay. If I'm in France, so question from Wanda. If I'm in France for 6 months on my 1 year long stay visa and decide to go to Poland or other EU country for a month or two, would I just use my French visa? Yes, as I was saying, France is very good in that regard, especially if you remain tax liable in France. That's basically the idea. So yes, as long as you're tax liable, you remain tax liable in France and remain a French permanent resident, then you can travel all across the globe, including the EU. And within the EU, that 90 days limit is also lifted. So for example, you mentioned Poland, you can go to Poland for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months if you like. Okay. The only limit with a French long-term visa, obviously, you cannot spend more than 6 months in another EU country, because then you would have needed to apply for a visa in that country instead of France. That's it. But yeah, that's basically the only limitation you'd have. What is the healthcare provision like for UK resident? Well, a question from Steve or Stephen. Yeah. So, yeah, well, it's a bit of a boring topic, insurance, but basically you need to meet. So if you want to fast track this, you can just get in touch with us, and you know, we have 100% money back guarantee and cheaper policy guaranteed kind of plans. But if you really want to have the details and the specific, you need to have a policy with a repatriation plan that has at least 30,000 euros worth of medical coverage in France. And in some visa centers like New York and London, we've seen them asking for 100,000 out of the blue. So we prefer to aim for 100,000. In and outpatient benefit. No, so it depends on, you're not using the same word for this one. So I'll use all. No copay, no co-insurance, no deductible, no excess, whatever you name it, it should be something as the French would call from the first euro. Okay, so so that's something you should meet as well. And also no medical exclusions. This one is a bit tricky depending on your situation. Basically the catch is nothing. I mean, we do have solutions whatever your situation, but the idea here is that you're covered. And the repatriation bit of the policy will always cover you, even if you'd have exclusions. But if any exclusion is written on the certificate of insurance, it's a no-go. And you should always also have a 1 year cover. The policy should be for 1 year, so basically matching your visa application dates. So my advice would be work with us. But joke aside, my advice would be whoever you end up working with, make sure they understand the French visa application process from where you're coming from, because it varies from the US, the UK, Canada, Australia. Really, it varies. And in a way, it's also political. So it also depends on the moment. So make sure you're working with people that have seen that and can strongly advise you and say, okay, we guarantee this will be a pass. Okay. Well, no one can really guarantee it. Again, it's not up, but they've done it tons of times. That's it. Okay, guys, how long do we have? 15 minutes. I'll try to rush into some questions very quickly. What do we have to do as in first step if wanting to move in October to France? Well, actually, very good timing. You're 6 months ahead. 6 months is the time. You can start applying 6 months ahead. So 3 main pillars for any visa application in France. Again, I like to repeat on this one, and all 3 main tests. First test, you need to have an address in France. Make sure you secure that. Either you bought a property, you have a long-term rental contract, or you know someone in France that can write you an attestation d'hébergement. Okay. So first pillar, proof of address. Second pillar, proof of income or proof of savings. So this one's very easy. It's either you have it or you don't. But so make sure you have, you can document the income, or even easier, you just have the savings, and on bank account, you just print that bank statement, you show that at the visa center, they'll be happy with it. And third pillar, medical coverage. So either private medical insurance or the S1 program if you're from the UK, or a European health insurance card if you're lucky enough to have a European social security number. So then if you meet the 3 pillars, the step is very simple. You apply for the visa, then you'll need to book an appointment in your country of origin. So it depends. If you're from the UK, that's TLS. If you're from the US, that's VFS. So it depends. If you're from Canada, that's VFS as well. It depends where you're coming from. You book an in-person appointment, and then, well, then that's it. You'll go through your visa application. Beware, guys, they'll keep the original of your passport, and that's usually like a couple of weeks process. So once you go at the interview, they'll keep the original of your passport, and they'll hand it over after after it's been either denied or accepted, that visa. So you're kind of stuck for a couple of weeks, just worth knowing. And then you move to France. Once in France, you wait for 90 days. You apply for Social Security, which is called CPAM, CPAM. You apply for that. And then once you're 90 days away from the visa expiry date, but no later than 30 days away. So that's 90 days to 30 days. That's the renewal, the visa renewal application window. And I prefer to use the term visa conversion into a residency permit. So then 90 days to 30 days ahead of the visa expiry date, you apply for the carte de séjour at your local prefecture, and that's it. Do we need to show receipt for all furnitures and goods that we ship to France? How large is the shipping? No, well, no, you don't need any of that. Well, that's kind of private business. You do need to organize that, and that might be relevant to the moving company you're using. We can also refer people to you if you'd like, but no, I mean, basically the site or us, I mean, they don't care about your furniture. It's like, if you'd like to have it insured or transported, yes, these guys might worry about how much it is or sensible your stuff, but that's it. Yeah. What taxes will I pay as a renter? Oh, well, depends where the rent comes from. Well, it depends if you're a renter, like a tenant, or if you have rental income. If you're a renter, I mean, I suppose we're talking about property tax. You have something called the taxe d'habitation, which you'll have to pay, which is based on how big your property is. This is usually fairly low tax anyway, but that's basically the only tax, apart from obviously income tax, that you'll pay on your property. If you are the landlord on the other end, or the property owner, then you have to pay the taxe foncière, which is the property tax. And if you have rental income, then you need to pay taxes on that rental income, but it's more like rental, income tax in a way. Although it's taxed, there is a particular box for the particular kind of income, but that's, yeah. So it really depends on the situation. Do we need 2 solicitors to move from UK to France? Not sure about the context of this question, so I don't know how to answer it. You only need 1 notaire. Well, you can have 2, one from the seller, one from the buyer, but usually you only have 1. So yeah, no. If we own a place in France, question from Brian, can we get a 1-year visa without knowing French? I signed on a few minutes slide, you were talking about required income. I have American insurance, Blue Cross. when I retire. Okay, well, Blue Cross, for example, is almost certainly not acceptable because there is an excess or a deductible. But that's actually good news because French insurance also is much cheaper. So it's better for both these situations to usually consider another insurance. But to answer the initial question, you own a place in France, can I get a 1-year visa? So yes, you definitely can get a 1-year visa. They don't ask about French. There is no French requirement, no French language test for the visa, and there is no test for the 1 year's residency permit either. So you can come to France. The fact that you have a property doesn't really make a difference. It's just that the more things you have in France, the more, especially if you don't have a mortgage on that property, for example, it makes your situation looks more stable. So everything it will be easier and they'll be more flexible with your file. That's it. Okay. Okay, Keith, are we able to work for an American company? We would live in France and work remotely. Or Karen, yes, definitely. And actually, it's a very good situation because in this particular context, you can apply for the visitor visa, which is one of the easiest to secure. So the visitor visa also is compatible with being a remote worker. The only catch you may have might be in regard to social taxes and getting into the French social security system scheme. So sometimes they may reject it. They may deny you entry into the French social security scheme if you're working for a company abroad, or if you want to enter the scheme, they may want to collect social taxes or charges from you. So for this one, you should be seeking advice just in regard to that. But in terms of visas and the fact that you could move to France, no problems. Actually, you're eligible to the visitor visa, which is a very good news. How about the healthcare system in France for Belgium? Well, you're a European, mate, so that's super easy for you. You just move to France, everything will be for free, and you'll get the benefit of the French system all for free. Super easy, this one. What is the name of the office where I would register for tenancy during my tenancy? You don't you don't register for tenancy. You negotiate a rental agreement with the property owner, and then that's it. And then you'll have to use that contract as part of to support your visa application. And so that is done within an office, indeed. In the US, again, that's VFS. In the UK, that's TLS. And in other places, that's often VFS. VFS is very, very big. So I don't know if that was a question, but that's my answer. Joe is asking, when applying for a long stay visa as a family, how much extra income needs? Yeah, 15% per child. So it's not that much that they'll have extra. It's actually a very small amount. I am self-employed contractor. I've had a house in France for 20 years. What process do I need to follow? Not sure I understand the question. In terms of which type of visa support. So, well, Stephen, I'll answer this question considering you're asking for which type of visa. And depends if you're considering to retire in France or to continue being a self-employed contractor. So if you're a self-employed contractor, you're self-employed, France will consider this a business. So that's a business visa. If you want to retire in France, then that's a visitor visa you'll apply for. Okay, another Stephen, not the same one. Good evening, Fabien. Insightful responses and appreciated real answers. Thanks for that, Stephen. You sent me the invoice after this conversation, all right? No, okay, joke aside, I have an online trading business which ships products to customers within Europe. Do you have any observations in if I bring the business with me to France, I could well leave the shipping element back in the UK? Yeah, well, actually, very often, this is a way to fast track your social security, your CPAM application in France. As you mentioned, in the UK, basically CPAM is the equivalent of the NHS. So you can set up a small business in France, or a big one for that matter, and apply for a business visa. But the fact that you have a business in France that will be generating, basically invoicing your British company, you will be paying social taxes in France. Could be very low if you're applying for like a small structure in France, like the self-employed structure, which is called a micro-entreprise. You'd basically be paying 20% taxes total, that's 23. So that's kind of good. And therefore, and with that, you'll have access to all of the French benefits. You're even paying for some French pensions for that matter. and you'll have social security and all very quickly. So that could be a very good option. Yeah. And then the business plan in your case would be super easy because you already have an ongoing activity and business. So yeah, that could be very good. Sandy is asking, US person, want to retire to France. So far, so good. If I buy a house or apartment my first year, am I now considered resident and taxed social charges? Is that a significant amount of money to budget for? My income will be about 4K a month. Okay, so so first, just with your income, you meet the requirements hands up. So no worries about that. You can buy a house or a property, or you can start with rental accommodation as you prefer. Both would qualify. The fact that you have either a long-term rental or bought a property will not change the fact that you consider a permanent resident. What makes that consideration is if you're living more than 6 months a year in France or not. So considering you'd be living more than 6 months a year in France, then you'll have to pay France and file. You'd have to file France national taxes, so a tax return in France, and you'll have to pay taxes based on whatever you're making. So whatever income needs to be taxed in France. So then it gets specific. More than happy to introduce you to a tax lawyer, which can also run simulations if you'd like. So in some cases, depending on where your money is coming from, depending on whatever the income is, comes from dividends, dividends as a particular social charges scheme, if it's income from a pension, but if it's not something you're drawing down from saving accounts, well, it really depends where the money is coming from. So depending on the source of the money, you'll be taxed differently, well, either for both for the social charges and the national taxes. Most of the time, you end up paying less in France, so it's not that bad. But very often, well, usually, I mean, to be transparent, most people we're working with, they charge like 150 to 300 euros to run the simulation with you guys. Well, not simulation, but to run through a consultation where they can advise on your specific situations in terms of taxes. So I would say the price tag is not high enough to be a put off. So I strongly suggest you get in touch with one of our advisors. So, well, again, we'll send an email afterwards, either book a consultation with me or just ask for some details, and I'll gladly share those with you. And by the way, we don't get any commission, guys. We're doing that pro bono. The goal for us is to see you make it to France. Okay, Alison, are you able to recommend a realtor? We spent summers in Ottawa. Yeah, sure. I'm more than happy to. Just again, we'll be sending a mail shot after well, not this evening because it's getting late in France, but tomorrow or within the weekend, we'll send a mail shot so that you can book a consultation with me or ask any questions, just to answer the email, and you'll get that. Michael is, I have EU citizenship as well as Australian. I have a house in France and usually live in France for about 6 months per year. If I stay longer than 6 months, do I have to file a French tax income return? I have no income from French sources, etc. Okay, well, as soon as you're spanning more than 6 months a year in a particular country, you do need to file a tax return in that country. Doesn't mean you'll be taxed. Sometimes you might be tax exempt, but you'll have to file a tax return. Again, everything, as long as taxes are part of the mix, I strongly suggest again, worst case scenario, we're talking about 300 euros for the consultation. So I would strongly suggest that. And as you have EU citizenship anyway, you don't need to have a visa. So yeah, well, again, get in touch and I'll gladly share some details with you guys. Okay, good morning from New Zealand. Well, glad to have some New Zealander around. Good. I'd like to buy a home in France. Can I do this and stay for 3 months each year, not for work, just retirement? From here, we can apply. Sorry. From here, can we apply for citizenship or EU? Okay. So no, citizenship, whatever the country, you need to have been around for 5 years. So you cannot apply straight away. But you can buy a home in France without a visa, without residency, without citizenship, actually without even coming ever in France if you'd like. You can invest or buy into France as freely as it gets, actually. So yes, you can do that, and up to 3 months each year, you don't need anything, because coming from New Zealand, you don't need a visa. Up to 90 days, every 180 days, actually, you're within the tolerance. So that's perfect. Not for work, even better. And can you, okay, so in your case, it's just if you want to exceed that 3-month allowance, you'll need to apply for a visa in New Zealand. But that's the same, especially if you retire. 3 main pillars. Sorry guys, I keep on repeating this, but that's very important, because if you get these right, you'll get through the gate. So, well, if you bought a property, you'll have an address, so proof of address checked. Proof of medical coverage in your case from New Zealand. Just have to buy a proper policy, ideally from us, checked. It's just a matter of buying it for it. And the third option is just, well, either you have income or from your retirement pension or whatever, or you have savings, and then you're good to go. So the visa is not a problem, wouldn't be a problem, shouldn't be a problem. Hopefully that answers the question, Mike. Laurie, should I apply? So okay, guys, I see it's 8 p.m. in France. I'll drag on for a bit just to make sure we answer as many questions as we can. Okay. But it's been a lot. I mean, a bit more than I expected. That's good. You've overwhelmed me, so that's good. But more than a pleasure to be answering as much as I can. Okay, so let's see. Sorry, I've scrolled and I've lost my stream. Okay, yes, David was saying my wife's retiring from the NHS in the UK this year and will be chasing pension and yakking the lump sum, which is a considerable amount of money. Well, good, David. Good for you. What is the figure she can pay into a French bank account so she doesn't need to pay into? Okay. Well, actually, it's a very good question. Yeah, well, especially when you're getting a lump sum of money. For example, in the UK, you'd have the ISIS or the 401k in the US. So very, very often, obviously, we don't have these things in France, but we have different schemes. So very often you have tax exemptions. You can draw down on your pension or your ISA, or 401k in the US. If you're looking to move permanently in France, very often it's you max out all your tax exemptions or your tax exempt savings. So you draw down of all of those. So as much as you can, that's tax-free or lowest taxes. Then transferring that money to France is not a tax event. So it's not a taxable event. You should consider currency exchange rates. And I would strongly suggest you work with a currency broker. It's very, very important because you could be saving tons of money. But yeah, so make sure you max out basically your exemptions, because once you've made the move, again, France does not recognize these events, these investment plans or pensions. So once you're in France and you're permanent resident in France, if you move the money across at this stage, then it becomes taxable in France. Because again, France doesn't recognize these investment plans. So make sure you do that while you're still under the exemption or tax exemption rules or allowances that you've built or whatever. So before you make the move. That's a very good question. Make sure you anticipate on that. If you do, well, you'll only have the taxes from the original country, the home country, and no taxes in France. Well, obviously, then if you reinvest that in France and it's generating profits or dividends or whatever, then these profits might be taxed. But France has a very particular scheme, which is called it's called assurance vie, which translates into life insurance, but it's not a death policy. Again, France being confusing is a jam. So we have that investment scheme that's called the life insurance, so assurance vie, and it's a very good one. You can invest into that as long as you're not drawing down from that policy. Everything's tax-free in it. Everything's tax-free. And even when you are drawing down, there is a very, very attractive tax exemption on drawdowns from an assurance vie in France. So make sure you use that. Again, more than happy to refer investment brokers. We have contacts for pretty much everything. So don't hesitate, ask any questions, and we'll be happy to refer you to experts. Okay, guys, can we fit in a couple more questions, and I'll try to be nicely tucked in a bit. Well, not yet. That's France. I need to have a glass of wine or two before I go to bed, though. I am a US citizen, would like to ultimately retire in France in 5 years. Okay, good, Jim. I'm a remote worker, so I could relocate before I retire. Yeah, okay. What are the difference between moving as a worker or as a retiree? Well, actually none. Well, it might have a difference in regard to social taxes and your ability to apply for French social security. So same, basically you should book a consultation with a tax expert in that particular regard. But otherwise, you could actually move probably right now and apply for a visitor visa, because that's the same as the retirement visa. I mean, retirees or remote workers would apply for a visitor visa. So you could actually do it straight away. The only difference is, as a worker, they'll use your income as the proof of income requirement. Well, fairly obvious. And as a retiree, that would be, well, savings you would have built, or income from your pension at this stage. But yeah, that's basically the only difference you'll have. Okay, this one I need to answer. Michael, I have a French spouse and I'm British. Can I get a visa to stay and work in France? We're in the process of purchasing a property in France. Good. I have a good news and a bad news, Michael. So, no, you don't need a visa. Actually, you can go to France as long as you're traveling together. Okay, you can move to France without a visa, and you can apply for a carte de séjour. So carte de séjour as the spouse of an EU citizen. In your case, carte de séjour as the spouse of a French citizen. You can apply for that straight away. So that's the good news. The bad news, Mike, is that unfortunately, it's harder for the spouse of a French citizen to apply for a multi-use carte de séjour than it is for the spouse of an EU citizen. This is France. I mean, you cannot make it up. So the difference is that you'll have to meet the language. You'll have to go through a language test straight away. Okay, don't worry if you don't get it. They'll give you a 1 year permit instead of multi-year permit, because it's supposed to be a multi-year permit. But basically, you'll have to meet a higher level of requirements than you would have if you were just the spouse of an EU citizen instead of a French one. That I won't comment this one, but I think you all got it, you know. So that's why I was saying I needed to answer this one. But basically, the good news is you can move without a visa. You can apply for a residency permit straight away. You have 90 days to do it, though, so make sure you get it done super quickly. If you don't have a good level of French yet, well, they'll give you a 1 year permit, so that's not the end of the world. But the requirements for your permits will be harder. So as you are the spouse of a French citizen, I prefer to not being the fearmonger. You'll make it through. They'll let you go. There's no problem. But it's just that if you want to have like a permanent life and stay in France, they'll be harder on you on the requirements. Like, yeah, okay. So Claire was saying, sorry, I should have mentioned 3,000 euros monthly income with both British passport holders. That then you massively qualify the requirement for income requirement. That's perfect. So you have it. So you just need to buy the insurance policy and make sure you have an address in France. Super simple. So Claire, you're almost already in France. So okay, Nat. Okay, some quick questions if you can. Nat, hello. You mentioned business plan. If applying for the visa to set up a business, for example, as a micro enterprise, are there any templates? Oh, yeah, guidelines. Well, that's the problem. That's why the business visa is one of the trickiest one, because there's no such thing as a template. There is no such thing as something, you know, you can fit into a box or a standard business plan. No, they're all non-standard, unfortunately. So, well, sorry, you have to do it, and it has to match your situation and whatever you're doing or considering doing. That's why it gets subjective. Yeah. James here, can I get a mortgage from a French bank account without being a resident in France? This one's tricky. We have partners. We can help you secure a mortgage in France or abroad, depending on where you're coming from. So yeah, this is a yes-ish answer. If it's a big mortgage, maybe. If it's a small one, it's a hard no. Like if it's 100,000, 200,000, even, like, it's probably going to be a hard no. If it's more than that, depends. Perhaps. If it's a big one, probably. But we do have partners who can help you secure that, or remortgage, or do things like that, you know. So, well, get in touch. I'm more than happy to share some contacts with you, and maybe they can help. For citizenship, is there a language test if you're over 60? Well, yeah, no, the 65 years old exemption was only for the multi-years residency permit. If you apply for citizenship, it's always the same requirement, even if you're a centurion. Sorry, Orin. Sorry. But you can just, get by with the carte de séjour, the residency permit. Okay. I'll try to go with very quick questions. Is it easy to get permission to run JITs? You actually don't need to ask for permission for that. So yes, it's easy. You just set it up. So you need to, no, you can be, part of, Les Gîtes de France or things like that, like networks. But it's kind of, an advertisement network or something like that. It's basically as easy as setting up an Airbnb business in a way. So you don't have to ask for permission. You do need to pay taxes on the profits made or the revenue, but that's it. Yeah. Also, didn't mention that, but if you're looking for accountants or things like that, because if you're setting up a business, more than happy to also share details. We're very deeply and highly connected. UK citizen, employed by UK company, remote worker. Oh, sorry, there's no question. Okay, I would like to okay, sorry, I didn't get the question. The email sent, okay. Yeah, well, Wendy, you probably received your email. Again, we received tons of questions. Don't worry, any questions that couldn't address this evening or this morning, depending on where you're on the planet, but feel free to actually book a consultation with me. It's a free consultation, guys, don't worry. Or ask any other questions over email. We'll be sending you an email as quickly as we can, and more than happy to be answering all of your emails. Just bear with me for a second, I would say, so that we'll catch up with all of your questions and emails. But don't hesitate, just answer the emails, and we'll be happy to answer as much as we can, or connect you with the guys who have the answer. Can you work if you have a carte de séjour? Yeah, sure, definitely. If you have a carte de séjour that's compatible with that, definitely. What is the best way to lease a car for 12 months? There's no best way. Just get yourself into a dealership, and if your file looks good enough, that's it. It's this exact same question as what's the best way to buy a property or get a mortgage. Especially for a lease, the sales agent you'll have in front of you usually wants to sell you the vehicle. So it's probably going to be super easy. As you're saying, 12 months though, if you're buying the vehicle and just want a 12-month lease, and not a 36-month lease, it's more like a long-term rental in your case. But basically, it's as easy as walking into a dealership and ask for it. We can also help you buy a vehicle, by the way. We can help you, we can even deliver you, if you're from the US, we can even deliver you to buy the vehicle somewhere, deliver the vehicle to the airport when you're back in France or going to France. Everything's doable. Just ask the questions. Okay. Okay, guys. Last questions, and then I'll have to go. Last question from Gina. If you invest 300K for the talent visa, can this include a JIT complex? Yeah, any type of investment. Actually, this is completely doable because instead of if you're buying the property, you can actually set up an SCI, which is real estate business in France. Send the money into that SCI, which is basically your business. You're the sole owner, or it could be a joint ownership, but of that SCI. Buy the property with it and use the money for buying the property and or renovations, whatever, and then run the JIT business within that property. This is a business. So yes, it does qualify. And actually, we have very particularly interesting things to say about that. But again, it's getting late, so we'll get back in touch. More than happy to help you with this one, or guide you in the right direction. Okay, guys, I see there are tons of other questions. I'm really sorry. I can't answer all of you guys, but again, I'll be sending you an email, a follow-up email. You can book a free consultation with me for all of the unanswered questions, and also respond to the email to ask all of the questions I wouldn't have addressed. As there are quite a few, I'll make sure to answer each and every question you'll ask as this follow-up email. Just bear with me until I can answer all of you, but definitely will do it. Thank you for joining. Thank you for being so many of you this evening or this morning again. And hopefully we'll see you in lovely France, and sunny France was today. So it's fairly soon. See you in a bit in France, and thank you for joining.